Hey guys, how's everybody doing? I just want to provide you with a quick training update. Some of our Teleflex EZIO drills are coming to the end of their life cycle. We know that by looking at the battery indicator on the back of the handle. If that thing's blinking red, it's time for it to be replaced. That means that battery is dying or it's dead. If it has a blinking green light, that means it's good to go. And what we've been noticing is that quite a few of these are coming back to the PSE and deemed failure in the field. So I like to give them a once-over to see if it's actually a battery issue or maybe it's an internal issue with the drill itself. And we gotta let Teleflex know, hey, we need some new devices. But what I've been finding is quite a few of the drills that are coming back are just fine. So that might point to a technique issue. So I just want to review proper technique with the EZIO drill real quick. What we have to remember is these little drills were not designed for torque. They're very much unlike a drill you would use at home. They're designed for speed, revolutions per minute. You got the tiny little motor in here. It's about the size of a C battery. If you start applying torque to it, it's going to slow down and it's going to bog down and it's going to fail. And we have to remember that the workhorse part of the equation is actually the needle. It's like the drill bit, if you will. And we have to allow it to do its work with the speed and revolutions per minute of the drill. So to drive my point home, see what I did there? We're going to use this tibial bone, and you might throw in the ring and box around the idea that, well, that's a training bone. It doesn't really mimic and form size, shape, or function a human bone. Well, it's pretty darn close. It has a pretty thick cortex to it, and it's pretty darn close to human bone. Some human bone might be more dense, some might be less dense, but that's the dynamics of the human body. But to really drive my point home, I am going to use the dullest IO needle in the history of IO needles. This is a training needle. It's been used a couple hundred times. It's dull as heck. I couldn't poke myself with it if I wanted to. But even though this thing is dull as heck, I'm still going to be able to drive it home and properly place it using a drill that was deemed effective. So again, we're going to find our proper landmarks. We're going to use good aseptic technique. We're going to get the proper size needle. We're going to poke it through the skin until we feel the bone. Then we're going to poke and peek, right? We're going to make sure we see black line before we start drilling, and we see black line. And then I'm going to squeeze the trigger, and I'm kind of going to guide it and use kind of steady, slight, even pressure just to guide it in a straight line. And we're going to let the drill bit, if you will, the needle, do the work. So it's working, even though it's dull. I can see little bits of bone coming through. So then we're going to, once it gets down close to the surface of the skin, I can feel it break through the cortex of the bone into the marrow, and then we know our EZIO needle is properly seated. We're going to pull out the stylet, put our stabilizer on, put our lock on, flush it, or use lidocaine if we have a conscious patient. So that's proper technique there. So let me show you an improper technique. By the way, that's not the proper technique. You should never do that in the field, but for demonstration purposes. So now, if I apply too much torque to this little drill, it's not going to be happy and it's not going to work right for us. So if I do everything right, proper landmark, good aseptic technique, I push through the skin, I feel the bone, I poke and peek, make sure I have black line, but then I really want to start driving this thing home, you can see it's going to fail. If I apply too much torque, it's going to fail. So please remember, steady, slight, even pressure forward, kind of guide the needle. It's the drill bit, let it do the work. It's the workhorse part of the equation. And just use revolutions per minute, and you'll feel it. Once you feel it break through the cortex of the bone, and it's properly seated, then we can do our usual techniques. So please remember that when you're using the EZIO drill, please remember that technique. And also remember, optimal placement for the EZIO is the humeral head. I understand the dynamics of a back of an ambulance. I know it could be hard to get to that area. If you have a critical patient and you're trying to capture an airway, start an IV, and do CPR, it might be kind of crowded in that area. I get it. But please remember, it's ideal. The humeral head has a thinner cortex. It's easier to drill through. Optimal flow rates comparable to that of a central line. Up to 5 liters an hour, we can get medications and fluid in the bloodstream directly through the subclavian into the heart in seconds, as opposed to the tibial insertion, which takes a little bit longer, maybe 1 liter an hour if we're lucky and we're using a pressure bag. So please remember that technique. If you guys have any further questions, please contact training. Have a good one.